Thank you for that introduction, and we'll just get on with it. We've got a lot of territory to cover today. So if we could have the first slide, please. So just to fill a little time here, I used to attend the church when it was on Banning. And Norman Naylor was mentioned before, and I remember him very well, not just for his services, but also for playing the organ. There was a big pipe organ in that church, and he really seemed to delight in playing that for the congregation. And we also had wooden pews in those days. And I forget who it was that told me that when they decided to take the wooden pews out and put in chairs, some of the people attending the church members were not very happy about that. So anyway, it's kind of a lot of background there in the Unitarian Church, and it's so nice to have this lovely space that we have here now. All right. Can we get the slides on the back wall as well? I can work with this if you like. So I'll just start here until we get rolling. I've got my text in front of me. So the title of today's sermon is Biodiversity and the Interdependent Web Going Beyond Respect. So the UU 7th principle is respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. So just taking some of those words, respect just out of one of the dictionaries, is admiration felt or shown for someone or something that you believe has good ideas or qualities. And existence, that's a really big word. I never really had read the principle before. When I read it or heard it, I always thought of the environment, but it goes way beyond that. And in fact, all that is actual. That is an expanded circle beyond living things, for example, the cosmos. So first I'd like to talk about biodiversity. Oh, just to say that I've broken my talk into 4 parts. Biodiversity, some of the work that I'm involved with, and the wonders of nature and what we can do about them, and concluding remarks about the UU principle. So biodiversity is the variety of life on Earth. It includes terrestrial and aquatic animals, plants, fungi, and bacteria, and the genetic diversity within them. These species interact with each other and the physical world around them to create ecosystems. All levels of biodiversity, genes, species, and ecosystems create intricate webs of life that support life on Earth. So the Government of Canada, Environment and Climate Change, has come out with a report and these statements. The science is clear, nature is in trouble. We have 3 crises. There are more, we know, but the ones that they're talking about at this point are biodiversity loss, climate change, and pollution. And there's urgent action needed to halt and reverse biodiversity loss. And the good news is that there is a plan. So this is a very detailed slide that's coming up on the timeline. The real serious interest in biodiversity started in 1992 at the Rio Earth Summit, when the first Convention on Biological Diversity was signed. In 1999, we got the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, or CEPA as it's called. This is our top law for pollution prevention to protect people and the environment. In 2014, the David Suzuki Foundation started the Blue Dot movement to have the right to a healthy environment enshrined in Canadian law. That was for clean air and water. And in 2015, our church signed on. I don't know if you remember, but Elizabeth Shearer and my daughter Ellen spoke at that service when we made the decision to sign on to that. In 2023, December, COP15 was held in Montreal. An important convention was signed, the Convention of Biodiversity, the Kunming-Montreal Global Diversity Framework. 2024, framework for the implementation under CEPA for the right to a healthy environment to be completed, and there'll be one more opportunity in the fall of 2024. The 2024 Milestone document also has come out for Canada's Biodiversity Strategy 2030, and the Minister of Environment has also said that there were some things that were missed when CEPA was revised, and they're planning to introduce a Nature Accountability Act in next year. So, Canadian Biodiversity Strategy, Vision and Mission. A just, nature-positive Canada and a map for how we will collectively get there. The vision is nature is healthy, thriving, and sustaining and enriching the lives of current and future generations. The mission is working together to halt and reverse biodiversity loss and put nature on a path to recovery. So the Milestone document is an interim document, and it came out with an outline of 7 pillars, and I'm going to just briefly talk about them, or list them rather. So the first is recognizing, upholding, and implementing the rights of Indigenous peoples and advancing reconciliation. Secondly, to commit to urgent, ambitious, and transformative action, and which includes the statement that biodiversity loss must be elevated to the same level of urgency as climate change, and they must have integrated action on both. Third is ensuring a whole-of-government approach, fostering a whole-of-society approach. 5 is empowering on-the-ground action. By the way, that's us. So I hope that we'll talk about this more and that we will have something that we act on. 6 is using the best available science and knowledge. The lack of scientific certainty must not be used to justify delayed action where there are significant threats to biodiversity. And 7th is applying an ecosystem approach and holistic perspectives. So for more information, next slide please, is the Milestone document, and I've got a website there, but if you just type in Milestone document, environment, climate change Canada, you'll find it. Next slide, please. So if you want to find out more, what I'm going to be talking about is electromagnetic radiation. To find out more about the biological aspects of that, there's a very fine website, which is, the webmaster is Ben Wolfe, who's from the Unitarian Fellowship in Peterborough, Ontario. So you can find out more about the biological aspects, which I will be covering as well. So secondly, Cate asked me to talk a little bit about my advocacy work. Next slide, please. So one of the first major things that I was involved with was the health risks of cigarette smoking. Since that was in the 1970s, since 1970s, I was very active in my workplace with the federal government, trying to ensure equal opportunities for women within the federal government public service, and of course that's used an example then for outside of the federal government. And then in the 1970s to the mid-1980s, I was really made aware of all of the environmental issues, especially in Manitoba when I became a member of the Manitoba Environmental Council, and that was an appointment by the Provincial Minister of the Environment. So as we know, there have been many successes, but there's still much work to do even on those particular issues which have been around for a while. So post-retirement, I retired in 2008, and I'm sure, as some of you know, I'm busier than ever. One of the things that I've really devoted a lot of time to is the risks to human health and environment from exposure to wireless radiation. Wireless radiation is non-ionizing electromagnetic fields, or EMFs for short. Those are from wireless devices such as cell phones, Wi-Fi routers, and cell tower antennas. Electromagnetic fields consist of electric and magnetic fields, and they're fundamental to our existence. So I was thinking, how am I going to explain this, briefly? So I, started searching, and lo and behold, I came up with this program. Next slide, please. That Bob McDonald, so anybody who watches or listens to Quirks and Quarks will be familiar with. So he does, highlights different scientific questions and different issues. And he interviewed this author, Sally Adee. The name of the Quirks and Quarks program is Humans Are Fueled by Food, but We Run on Electricity. And the title of the book is We Are Electric. So, next slide, please. I became fully engaged in the issue in 2010. That was when I saw an interview with the Director General of Health Canada that said there was no science supporting parents' claims that their children could be made ill from exposure to newly installed Wi-Fi in their schools. But I knew there was published scientific evidence in 1998 because I myself developed adverse effects when I was exposed to certain kinds of electricity. So why was Health Canada not aware of the scientific evidence? And why are they not taking action accordingly? Next slide, please. So 14 years later, I still don't have an answer. But I do know Health Canada is not doing its job, and there are many things that it could be doing to educate people about this particular issue. Non-ionizing EMFs, as once thought, are not benign. Ample evidence exists that EMF exposures at everyday levels cause a range of adverse effects. The cancer is strong for cancer, sperm damage, and many others. Those are the long-term effects. The shorter-term effects, well, the sperm damage actually is short-term as well. I guess I should move that from the list. The short-term is headaches, sleep disturbances, heart irregularities, muscle aches and pains, you name it. Our bodies are electric, and it's kind of like what the weakest link is on what will be affected. And industry is using the same playbook as the cigarette industry. This will take time, and it'll take persistence. So advocacy, on the next slide, please. So now we've sort of smashed our head against we're not giving up, by the way, with Health Canada, but as we went along, and of course this is my passion, is plants and animals, wildlife, and then we discovered that there's a lot of work to be done in terms of non-human species. So now we're focusing efforts on EMFs on wildlife, which includes pollinators such as honeybees. The human limits, by the way, there are limits for cell tower antenna exposures, is 2 million to 10 million microwatts per meter squared. Plants and animals can be adversely affected at levels below 10. So I'm going to let that sink in a little bit. So the levels that we have for humans, which by the way are not protective, I think there's a lot of evidence indicating that, certainly do not protect non-human species, including wildlife. There are no protective limits for non-human species in Canadian law. Next slide. If you'd like to see more about that, I gave a talk in February on wireless impacts wildlife at today's cell tower emission levels, and I would be more than happy to send anybody a link. Next slide, please. So one of the slides that I have in my presentation, I've modified it a little bit here, is on insects, which are really very fundamental to our our food web. This was a review that was done in 2019, and the authors did not look at EMFs or wireless radiation, but based on what they call drivers of the decline of insects, which is habitat change, pollution, biological traits, climate change. They make the statement that if insect species losses cannot be halted, this will have catastrophic consequences for both the planet's ecosystems and for the survival of mankind. Pretty serious stuff. So I did a literature review as a conference in Winnipeg here, and I presented at the conference, and there's a proceedings paper that I wrote with Magda Havis, who's a retired professor from the University of Trent. There's also a review done by Dr. Belmori from Spain and Dr. Kumar from India, and we all come to the conclusion that electromagnetic fields could be a cofactor, in fact, very likely a cofactor in this decline. So it's not just one thing, but a whole bunch of different things together. Next, please. So, sorry, please go back. So, of course, we're not the only ones to say this. International scientists, who, by the way, are independent of industry influence, just like cigarette smoking, there are a lot of tobacco scientists out there, and we've got EMF scientists who, are for hire, so to speak. So independent scientists that RF, radiofrequency radiation, has been proven to be harmful for humans and the environment. And as of December 27, 2023, there were more than 400 scientists that signed on to that, and medical doctors, by the way. And very importantly, next slide, please. So through our advocacy work, and this is teamwork, we finally got a report that we thought had never been written by Environment Canada and climate change, but in fact, we finally did get this report by Dr. Kim Fernie, who studied EMFs on birds, and in that report, one of the sentences is, the potential of increasing EMF, electromagnetic fields exposure, as a contributing factor to adverse effects in wildlife in conjunction with recognized environmental stressors should be considered. So even Environment Canada and climate change recognizes that this could be a very big problem. I just want to add that when we had our meeting with top people from Environment Canada and climate change, $0 are allocated to this, and 0 human resources are allocated to it. They're not studying it. What they said, what they told us, is that it has to become a higher profile. So that's up to us to do it, again. So I just want to talk a little bit about, yes, if anybody's looking for more information, this is a really go-to website, ehtrust.org. It's, the founder is Dr. Deborah Davis, who is an epidemiologist and founded the oncology department at Pittsburgh University, co-recipient with Al Gore of the Nobel Peace Prize for her work on climate change. And she has devoted her time to educating people about this. And an excellent book is the book she wrote about called Disconnect. So if people want to read up on that, there's an idea there. All right, I'd like to talk a little bit about the wins and the positives. So this is slow, but it is going in the right direction. For example, the Green Party of Canada has they've ratified 2 policies related to wireless radiation. The House of Commons Standing Committee on Health in 2015 gave 12 very good recommendations, 4 on electromagnetic hypersensitivity, which was passed unanimously by the committee members. We were all members of Parliament and were from the Liberal, Conservative, NDP. Unfortunately, because of Health Canada, this is gathering dust, so we have to try and revive it, and we're working hard to do that. Also, that electromagnetic fields were mentioned in the Milestone document that I referred to earlier. Next, please. There are numerous successful oppositions across Canada to cell towers proposed near homes and schools. Once people realize that this is really not healthy for them or their children, they become very mobilized about this. So we had a number of situations here in Winnipeg, actually, which were successfully opposed. There were several important amendments to the City of Winnipeg cell tower antenna siting policy of 2015, the 5G small antenna installations project is on the Winnipeg's public engagement site. Hard to find, like a lot of other things on that website, but they're actually proposing to put at least 3,000 and maybe over 4,000 small antennas every half block in the city. So that's basically on lampposts and utility poles and other non-tower structures. And if something's on a non-tower structure, this is one of the flaws in the policy, City of Winnipeg policy, they don't have to tell anybody, they can just go up. So that's basically like putting a cell tower on every block. Also the opt-out for smart water meters in Winnipeg. And this was done not just by an individual, this was teamwork. People who spoke up, emailed, spoke to counselors, and so it's really important that people get together on this issue. Next slide, please. So what I find encouraging is when I see people, when they're using their cell phones, you don't see a lot of people use them against their head anymore. They hold them using speaker mode away from their bodies. And the reason I find this encouraging is when people do that, they must know something that this is not good to do this. And it's not because of any kind of education program by Health Canada. It's because of non-governmental groups who are educating people about the health risks of this particular technology. Next, please. So wins and positives for the UU Green Action Committee, not very active right now, but the individual members are, but at one time, there were a lot of initiatives that were actually implemented in this church. And we brought in speakers on environmental issues. And we're also a member of the Manitoba Eco Network, which is a wonderful organization. And we've participated in planning several forums on the environment prior to mayoral, provincial, and federal elections. Next, please. So, wonders and much work to do. So as you noticed in the offertory, there were pictures of nature, and those actually were all taken by people who were electrosensitive. So one's interests and rejuvenation, refreshing comes from nature, and this is what we find helps to heal us, is to be in touch with nature. So possible actions, next slide. Why should we be doing this? Well, number one, because it's good for us. There's nothing like a great walk, or even to look out the window. I mean, we have such a lovely, lovely view here, and it's okay to look out the window once in a while and feel, that we're replenishing our spirit. Next, please. Be aware. So there are many good resources. ehtrust.org is one of them. I co-authored a paper with a couple of medical doctors and others, Building Science and Radio Frequency Radiation, What Makes Smart and Healthy Meters. I will come to your home or lend you a meter. I've got a whole bunch of meters, by the way. Exposed to right now. And what we need to do as well, next please, is we need to empower our youth and young adults. Some of them feel very, very hopeless, and we need to get more kids, young and old, off their devices and into the outdoors. They're overprotected in the real world and underprotected online. Next, please. This book is not about wireless radiation, but it makes the point that cell phones, and all of these devices that our young people are on, and a lot of adults, is we have to balance that. We have to realize it is just a tool and that it should not be taking over our lives. Next, please. Possible actions. There are individual actions that are important for reversing diversity loss. Join or support financially environment groups. Electoral reform, we've talked about that in the church. Citizen science, there's a global EMF project, and much, much more to consider at another time. And now my concluding remarks. So, going beyond the 7th principle, 7 of the 8 UU principles are about people. We will protect what we value. I believe it is time to put more value and a sense of responsibility to the natural world by adding the 9th principle to specifically mention protecting and conserving nature and biodiversity. And so I put that question forward to you and other Unitarians to think about. Thank you very much for your attention.